What if I told you the man who tried to stop Jesus became the man who died for him? Same man, same family, 30 years under the same roof. Then he appeared to James. What does a man do the morning after his dead brother walks into the room? 3 words, no description, no details. Paul writes it like everyone already knows what it means. But here's what nobody asks. Think about the last argument you had with someone you love. Now imagine they died. Now imagine 3 days later, they were standing in front of you. That is what happened to James. He had spent years publicly questioning his brother's sanity. He had tried to bring him home, convinced he was out of his mind. And when the cross came, James was not there. Most of us have doubted someone we later discovered was right. James doubted for 30 years, not from a distance, from the same table, the same bloodline. This is not just a mere religious story. It is a story about what happens to a person when everything they believed about someone turns out to be wrong. Something changed James, something so undeniable, so completely outside ordinary experience that a skeptic became a martyr. The man who doubted longest became the man who held longest. When every other leader scattered, James stayed in Jerusalem, built the church from the city that killed his brother, and died rather than deny what he had seen. That is not the arc of a man who was lying. That is the arc of a man who was absolutely certain. We don't have his words from that morning, but we have everything that came after. And what came after is the evidence. Almost nobody knows this story. This is part 2, the family of the king, James, the pillar. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. This series is just getting started. James, Yaakov, became the leader of the Jerusalem church. Not Peter, not John, the brother who did not believe. He acquired 3 names: James the Just, for righteousness; Oblius, a Greek word meaning bulwark of the people, the man the city of Jerusalem itself leaned on; and Old Camel Knees, because according to Hegesippus, a 2nd century Christian writer whose accounts Eusebius preserved, the skin of his knees had hardened like a camel's hide from years of unbroken prayer. Not metaphor, literal, physical. The body keeping a record the words never could. In Acts 15, it is James who presides over the Jerusalem Council. Could Gentiles become Christians without first becoming Jewish? Peter spoke. Paul spoke. James spoke last. When he finished, the room accepted his verdict. His epistle burns with clarity. Faith without deeds is dead. Tame the tongue. He does not introduce himself as the brother of Jesus. Only James, a servant. The man who once tried to bring Jesus home would not trade on that connection, even when it could have opened every door in the world. In 62 AD, the high priest Ananus ordered James executed. Josephus, writing as a neutral historian, records a stoning and confirms that even law-observant Jews were outraged enough to demand Ananus be removed from office. Hegesippus, a 2nd century Christian writer drawing on earlier tradition, adds the details that have defined James in Christian memory ever since. Thrown from the temple pinnacle, surviving the fall, kneeling in prayer, still saying, "Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do," before being struck with a fuller's club. 2 sources, 1 man. Both agree his death was considered an injustice even by those who did not share his faith. Of Joseph, called Joses, history preserved almost nothing. No epistle, no martyrdom account, no missionary tradition that survived. He simply disappears from the record. The brother history swallowed. But consider this, not every person in a defining story gets a defining record. Some of them simply lived, worked, believed, raised children in the faith, grew old, and returned to the dust without headlines. Joses may have been that man. In a family of martyrs and bishops and letter writers, there is nothing less honorable about a quiet life faithfully lived. Nothing less honorable at all. If this story is reaching you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Most people will never know these names. You do now. Pass it on. We'll be right back. After James, the disciples chose another member of Jesus' family to lead the Jerusalem church. Simon, listed third in every passage. Discussed in almost no documentary ever made. The brother nobody talks about. Early sources, Eusebius and Hegesippus, identify him as Simeon, most likely the Simon named in the gospel lists, though they describe him as the son of Clopas, Joseph's brother. This has led some scholars to classify him as Jesus' cousin, rather than biological brother, placing him within the same family network that produced James and the others. Whether brother or cousin, the Jerusalem church chose him as the man most qualified to lead. Another member of the family of Jesus. He led the Jerusalem community through the Jewish revolt of 66 AD, fleeing, tradition says, to Pella before the city's destruction, then leading his people back through the rubble after Jerusalem fell. He shepherded that community through the reign of 4 Roman emperors. Narrator: under the Emperor Trajan, Simon was finally arrested. 2 charges: descendant of David's royal line, and Christian. He was tortured, then crucified. He endured it without breaking. Hegesippus records that Simon was approximately 120 years old at his death, a number that in ancient tradition carried the symbolic weight of a complete and fully lived life, the same age attributed to Moses. Whether precise biography or sacred memory, even the Roman judge who ordered his execution was reportedly astonished at his endurance. Jude, Yehuda, wrote the brief, ferocious letter that bears his name. 25 verses, 2,000 years. It opens with a sentence that arrests every reader who truly stops to think about it. Jude, a servant of Jesus Christ and a brother of James. Not Jude, the brother of Jesus, servant. This man, who ate at the same table, slept under the same roof, grew up beside the person 2 billion people now call Lord, introduced himself not by his family connection, but by his function. He could have opened every letter with 4 words that would have commanded any room in the ancient world. Brother of Jesus Christ. He chose servant instead. The earliest sources do not record his death. What medieval Christian tradition preserved, centuries later, is that he carried the gospel to Mesopotamia and Persia and was martyred with an axe, which is why every icon of him shows him holding one. What the early record does preserve is his letter, and the single word he chose to introduce himself, a servant to the end. Hegesippus, writing in the 2nd century, preserves what happened next. Emperor Domitian, ruling Rome from 81 to 96 AD, became alarmed by reports of the Desposini, the blood relatives of Jesus. Anyone descended from David's royal line was a potential rival. He ordered them brought to Rome. 2 of Jude's grandsons were escorted before the emperor. Domitian asked directly, "Are you related to Jesus? Do you believe in a kingdom? Are you a threat to Caesar?" The grandsons of Jude did not speak. They held out their hands. They told the emperor, "The kingdom of Jesus is not of this world. It comes at the end of history. We are farmers. We work the earth with these hands. We are no threat to Caesar." Domitian looked at their hands. He dismissed them. He lifted his persecution of the church. The family of Jesus, who began as skeptics in a carpenter's house in a village no one had heard of, had within 2 generations stood before the most powerful man on earth and walked away free, not because they claimed power, because they refused it. Jesus once said, "Whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and my sister and my mother." He threw open the definition of family, past bloodline, past the walls of that stone house, to anyone willing to believe. But he started with a literal family, people who doubted him, people who tried to bring him home, people who were publicly embarrassed by him in the marketplace, and one, recorded in the Gospel of Mark, who was standing at his tomb in the dark, with spices in her hands before the sun came up, before it was safe, before anyone knew what had happened. James, Joseph, Simon, Judas, Mary, Salome. 6 people from a house in a village nobody cared about. They did not build an empire. They did not seize power. They held out their hands, calloused, cracked, ordinary, and offered everything they had. And as the youngest among them wrote, in the last words, he left to history, "Mercy, peace, and love be yours in abundance." If this series has meant something to you, subscribe and leave a comment below. Tell us which member of this family stayed with you. His family grew up with him. His apostles walked with him. Who were the 12 really? That story is next.